Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining this session of our Kandy Fireside Chat. Today's topic is on regulatory compliance and provisioning. And with me, I have Dave Fowler, who's been with us before from our support and operations, been with the product for many, many years. Also, Chris Taylor and Kevin Howell Patterson from Product Line Management. So just a bit about logistics. We are recording this and we will provide this to you in a replay email as well as the presentation material. So if you want to share these internally, and this will be posted on our kandy.io/events page. You can ask any of your questions within the chat and our team will field those and ask them as we go along. So please, in the chat, go ahead and post any questions that you may have. So again, welcome. Our topics today on regulatory compliance and provisioning are really to talk about a lot of the things that many of you have been asking questions about. Emergency, there's been lots of regulation that have been put into place and are you want to understand what we're doing around that. In fact, in the United States, there are two regulations in particular about Ray Baum's Act and Kerry's Law. We'll talk about what we've done there. And we'll also talk a bit about our HIPAA certification, and then Lawful, Intercept, and CALEA. What is that? What have we done? What are we doing? And then particularly the last part about stir, shaken, and robocalling prevention and telephone number spoofing. All right, so let's start out just some basics to level set, and let's talk a bit about a term that an acronym we use quite frequently called PSTN. That stands for Public Switch Telephone Network, and that's the interconnection of routing calls from a point A to point B. In this example here, I've got a diagram. And some of these are circuit switch, some of these are mobile, satellite, all of that interconnecting together to get a call from, let's say, this class 5 local exchange to another class 5. It has to go through what are called tandem service switching centers, and all those are class 4, and those kind of act as the routing engines, if you will, to the various locations, some of which are old circuit switch telephony type of networks, some of which are cloud type of networks too, but they're all interconnected, and it's global. It's all different operators, all different sizes, small, medium, large, and it's how we all interoperate our calling. So here's an example of a call coming from one location, going through its class 5, the class 4 network, other hops along the way, then to get to another area code, another country, whatever that is. And again, this could be a cloud provider in the middle of that mix. Now, why do I mention this? Is because that's the baseline of a lot of the conversations that we have in the rest of the presentation here. One thing that is different about our service is we don't force you to use a certain telephony provider. Many of you are telephony providers. You have your own soft switch and gateways. You have your own SBCs. Some of you do not. Some of you leverage third parties like bandwidth.com, IntelliQuint, IntelliPeer, whoever else. There's tons of them out there. And so what we do is have a SIP trunk from your soft switch, let's say, into the Kandy network. If you're using a peering platform or cloud peering service, then there needs to be a SIP trunk between them to us. Or if you want to leverage, Kandy has now implemented for quite some time now our own PSTN services, not only in the United States, but we've partnered with some other regional like Colt and others out there to resell those for you. And some of our partners, even those on this call, may have actually done a little bit of all three of these in order to get the coverage that you need for your customer base. And so that's okay too. You can have one or two or three, however you want to do. And what that provides is maybe you have a footprint and you have your own soft switch, but you have some um, customers who have offices in areas where you don't have telephone numbers. And so could be in your country, it could be in your state, it could be in your county, it could be outside of that. And so by either leveraging the Kandy PSTN resale arrangements that we have, or utilizing third-party cloud peering providers, you can augment that and provide more telephone numbers for them. Now, again, it's based upon your business needs. Okay, so that's important as we roll into emergency calling. And I'm not going to call this just 911 because that's kind of a US centric type of service. Our emergency calling is set up for no matter where you are in the world, what country, what region, whatever number that you dial to get emergency services, which could be 112, 119, 999, whatever it is. Those are all defined when we set you up as a partner. Or if you have services in another location, whatever it is, another country through one of our other nodes, when we set you up in that node as well. And so those are all done through the customer information questionnaire that we work with you from our project and customer success teams working with you to onboard that implementation. So when that is done, when um, you tell us where you want to route emergency calls to what ESP, emergency services provider. That could be a third-party service like Intrado or Red Sky or whatever else is out there for you, a cloud-based service, or it could be you're doing it on your own. Every time you have a new telephone number or assign it to a customer, you're submitting documentation either online or paper documentation to tell these answering positions, these dispatchers, where the physical location is of this caller, name, telephone number, physical location. Those are all registered, and it's on our service providers who are handling the PSTN. So I'm going to go back. If you have your own soft switch, you're doing this today, okay? It's not up to Kandy. If you're using a third party like a bandwidth.com and Intrado, sorry, not Intrado, but IntelliPeer on your own or IntelliQuint or whatever it is, there's tons of them out there, then you're going to do that with them. If you do that through the Kandy PSTN as part of selecting a number and assigning it, all of that, you're submitting that documentation in the same portal. Okay, so that is all very important as you're setting up and utilizing these numbers, part of the porting request and all that. So as a 911 call is made or an emergency call is made, what we do in Kandy is we replace in the SIP header information, we replace the calling party number with the ANI information. And that ANI information is what is submitted over to the ESP provider that you have for them. And that way, the public safety answering point, or that's what we call it here, but the emergency dispatchers know where to send the appropriate personnel. Okay, so that's the basics of how emergency calling works with us. So it's up to as you're setting up that PSTN connectivity, how am I going to route calls out of the system? It's sent the way that you set that up originally. Okay. So let's talk about Ray Baum's Act. So this is a regulation in the United States that came about, and even though it's specific to the United States, we've opened this up in how we implemented this, that it's not just for the United States. So no matter where you are, where the services that you offer, you still have this ability. And that if you dial, and I'm going to use the example of 911, when I make a call on my business line, I can dial if I'm going to make an outside call, You can set it up in the CIQ when we originally set up that domain for you, or your partnership with us in the creation of your partner. Do you want to require to get an outside line to dial a number like a 9 plus or an 8 or something like that? If someone is dialing 911, in this case, emergency number, you can have it have a 9 plus 911 as well as a 911 automatically pass through that is an emergency call. Don't force them to enter an access code in order to make that outside call. So Kandy has already been compliant in this. Whichever one, both of them will go. We'll make sure that a 911 call for this domain is sent without requiring that outside access code, or an outbound dial digit is what we've called it in the past. So either way, if you say 119 is my emergency, so you won't have to enter a code plus 119 in order to do that. So hopefully that's clear. The other thing is that we need to send the dispatchable location so that the dispatchers know where to send the ambulance, the fire, the police in that, even if you're nomadic. And what does nomadic mean? That I'm not sitting in the physical headquarters office. I'm working from home today, or I'm on my cell phone. So no matter what, you can't just register the business headquarters office with that. You've got to include a location. So we have that ability too. And that, but you have to submit that documentation either online or whatever whenever you're setting that user up, or provide a way for them to update that to you. And Intrado, Red Sky, and others allow you to, they actually build portals to allow your end customers to go in and update on their own as needed. So a few things within our provisioning. Okay, so I'm going to start out in the site. In the site, over at the top right, there's an area called Site Public Number, Site Public Name. This is purely for the caller ID, if you want to use this. If you want, as people make a call out, you want their outbound caller ID to be the company, not their individual telephone number and all, you can put it here. This is optional. If I were to put 214-555-1000 and the site public name as ABC Realty, then anytime I make an outbound call out through the PSTN, the destination will get that, and it will say, this is an incoming call from ABC Realty, 214-555-1000. So that is, when I used to program PBXs and phone systems, I would have all of the telephone numbers as they were making outbound calls to show that number, the business number. You can do that. It is optional, but you can do that, okay? If it's not provisioned here, if this is left blank at the site level, then you can, the caller ID will be the subscriber's telephone number. So I'm going to show you what happens here. If I'm provisioning subscribers, the bottom right quadrant of subscribers is what I'm talking about. And just to pull that out and make it a little bigger for you, is this public number. Sometimes people gloss over this, and by default, it's going to be whatever telephone number that you selected in the pick list for VoIP number. Even if it's a dummy number, it will appear here. So what happens on an emergency call is that even if I had the site public number and all of that, this number will be my emergency calling number. It would say an emergency call is made from, in this case, Sarah Butler, from 512-681-5661, not the ABC Realty and not the 1000 in there. And even if you have a dummy number for this user, if a 911 call or emergency call is made, this needs to be a dialable, routable number. That's really important for these regulations, is that be a true number, and that number be registered up as to where this person is at. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So sometimes people get these two fields confused in how they interact and work. Dave Fowler, did you have anything maybe you wanted to add to this, or any questions that have come up?
No, I think you got it. You got it correctly. It's just to, well, I will reiterate one more time.
Mhm.
The site public name and number are not used for emergency services.
Right.
The system recognizes 911 or others as a emergency number, and it will use the charge ID associated with the subscriber.
Right. And the charge ID is this public number field that we have in admin. Okay. Under subscribers. So let's talk about Carrie's Law. And this is a sad story, but this was a woman that was in a hotel room. um, Something happened. The daughter needed to dial 911. And because they were in a hotel, the 9-year-old daughter uh, didn't know, didn't read on the deal. I mean, anxiety, adrenaline, and dialed 911, but didn't dial the outbound access dial digit of 9 or 8 or whatever in order to actually make the call out. So the call didn't go out, and the 9-year-old daughter saw her mom pass away. And, how traumatic. So again, it requires all businesses to route emergency calls without them having to dial this 9 plus or 8 plus, whatever that outbound dial digit was. But the second part of this was to, what? Somebody locally there at that hotel could have come and rendered aid if someone had been notified. And so this law, Carrie's Law, also enforces that you have some way to notify people. And so we've implemented this at the site level where you can put in an email, you can put in a telephone number, you can put in and text somebody. And we've also implemented the ability within our admin logs to trace that a 911 call or emergency call was made from this person at this number, all of that kind of stuff. So you can show that this actually worked. So let me show you where this is at. If I go into sites, okay, here, and I click on manage address, many of you don't know this, so pay close attention to this. There, in the manage address section, we've had this address and information here that you could put in. In fact, your sites may be set up so that is mandatory that you put this in, at least the top portion. That's configurable at the partner level. But these fields have been added based upon Carrie's Law. Okay, so you can put in an emergency notification email so that this is emailed to somebody that an emergency call was made by this person from this number. You can also put in a telephone number. And of course, you can do multiple emails. You can put in multiples. A distribution list might be a great idea here, an email distribution list. You could also put in a telephone number so that would call security or guard shack or something like that. And then finally, you can also put in a cell phone number, and that number would then get a text that an emergency call was made. You can go in and test this as well, and it will tell you when you save this that the SMS will come from this number. So those people who are getting that text message will know not to block it, but know that this is an emergency type of thing. So this is what it would look like, that if I got an email, okay, if I got a text message, if I got a call, either one of those, it would say an emergency call was made by, and this being Jim Smith and his telephone number. Same thing, I would get a call and it would audibly give me the details and repeat those. And then I would get a text message, the same thing. So that at the same time that the PSAP dispatchers are sending people out or trying to get a hold of whoever has dialed 911 here, that somebody can go render aid at the same time. So why do we show you this? So that you can change your operations and your processes to ask those questions at the site level. As I'm provisioning this site, do you have people who need to be notified? Yes. Then who is that? And so those are part of Carrie's Law to implement that. So don't forget in your provisioning of sites that you should click on manage address and go back to your existing customers and talk to them about this as well. Do you have at this site, those are physical site locations, who is it that needs to be notified? Is it an operator, a receptionist? Is there a security guard? Is there a team of people that are trained EMTs on site? Are there volunteer employees who are willing to be part of the EMT team to go help render aid? Asking those questions during your onboarding of new customers. So very, very important to do. Okay. If there are any questions about any of that, please add them to the chat, and then we will go in and um, call them out and go through them. HIPAA, very, very important. HIPAA is Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And yes, it is a US type of thing, but it doesn't preclude other countries as well. And as employees of Kandy Communications and AVC Technologies Company, each year we go through training and we attest that we are HIPAA certified in that everybody, all employees have gone through. We know what personal information is. We will not share that information outside of this. And also just want you to know that as a company, we have self-attested that yes, we've all been through this training. So that you can offer services to healthcare companies and so on. We're not sharing any information that's specific to, and we're not storing information about their health matters or anything like that. So again, we, as far as regulatory and compliance, we are there. Now let's talk about lawful intercept. Okay, it's also here in the United States called CALEA, and what that stands for is an act that was brought about many years ago. This has been something in the typical legacy phone system before VoIP. Is the Communications Assistance Law Enforcement Act. What that is that the police and all can go in and tap somebody's line if they have legal justification and the court system, the legal system has given a court order to do so. And there are two types here in the United States. Some of you have been service providers for years and years and years and have never had a lawful intercept request, but you still have to have it in place in the event that they do. And so it is regulation. And each country has different regulation requirements and connectivity and all of that. But it also comes down to the PSTN setup that you have. If you have your own class 5 soft switch, if you have your own, you secured other peering partners, or if you're using the Kandy PSTN services. Each one of those will have a way that these local authorities can connect up with a secret code or however it is to come in and send that provisioning request to you so that they can get this information. I know in some soft switches that I've worked on, there's a special area that you put stuff in. There's a service bureau and all. Others, they leverage the SBC to have that connection there. And so sometimes you just, the court order may say, I just want the telephone numbers that they are making to and from. And so that's the caller ID information. Others say, I actually want to get the call details. I want the call recordings, all of that kind of stuff. We've all seen the TV shows where, in a legal wiretap, that's not what we're talking about. These are legal. And they go through this kind of service bureau of sorts that all of the law agencies in a particular country will connect up to get that information. And so then they listen in on the bad actors or the bad guys here could be girls too. But the PSTN method or the SBC method is what determines that connectivity. So within Kandy provisioning, you're not going to see anything. It's all down at the next layer within the PSTN. And again, each country has their own requirements. That's why you'll see a lot of them called LI or lawful intercept in that. Okay. Um, so then finally talking a bit about robocalling and stir shaken IP address, or actually caller ID spoofing. We've all been victim of this. In fact, I just got another one comes in, and for me, my experience is English is my first language. I do speak some Spanish, but not fluent. Um, and so I get calls all the time. I answer them. It looks like they're in my area code and even close to my same telephone number. So they're spoofing and they're telling me about an extended warranty on a car I no longer have. And so, that kind of stuff, it's constant. And so what has happened, and you can see Stir Shaken, what that stands for is Secure Telephone Identity Revisited, and then signature-based handling of asserted information using tokens. And so what happens here is because so many of us have complained about this to the federal communications committees, FCC, and all that here in the US, but it's global too, is that they've come up with a way to ensure that these are valid numbers and that, to stop this illegal spoofing in here. And so what happens in the SIP messaging in the header, that they're going to put an encrypted certificate in there. And that encrypted certificate is going to have the service provider, whoever's providing the PSTN service here, and the trust value. And the trust value is either an A, a B, or a C. And I'll mention that. And then the receiving end of that has to be able to decouple that and de-encrypt that information, so using a public key. So there's a handoff, and everybody in the world is talking about this now. But the attestation is basically saying that it's the confidence level of that this is a legitimate caller, and the calling that they're making is legitimate. And so full attestation classification A or type A means that I know the customer and I'm authorizing that this truly is their telephone number that is making this call. So it's just legitimizing that, hey, I know this customer, I know this number. So that's A. B means I know the customer, but I don't know, it could be on the number. The customer is legit though. And C is a gateway attestation that the customer is unknown, but it's coming from a source like an international gateway that I do know. And so how Stir Shaken is implemented is, again, up to your PSTN connectivity that you have. So if you are using your own soft switch in there, then it's up to you to choose a provider for this and set that up, and then will use whatever you have in your network on that. Similarly, if you use a peering provider, many of those have solutions for Stir Shaken, and your numbers would be part of that as well. If you use their service or their solution, again, bandwidth.com is a very common one, there's tons of them out there, then you using that service will be marked more than likely as exempt because you're using their service in that. Similarly, our PSTN in the United States, we use a company called IntelliPeer, and they have given us the exempt status as well. And so if you're using Kandy PSTN here in the United States for your business, your residential, outside your territory areas, then you are also exempt as part of that using the IntelliPeer. However, there are some things, and that's where I'm going to hand off here in just a second to PLM, of what we're doing on both Lawful Intercept and Stir Shaken and all of that. But the big thing here is to make sure, no matter what solution that you're providing, that you make sure and populate the calling party with a true E164 number or a full 10-digit number. Don't just put an extension in there. Now, why did I show you that before in the site and in the subscriber public number? Because that's your caller ID. So that's super, super important in making sure this is a true legitimate user telephone number in making those calls as they go through. So even if you're 7-digit dialing, use the 10-digit dialing or whatever your regional area dialing is. E164 is actually including the country code in that. And so moving over to that format could also be part of the solution for you. Okay, so let's go to the next one. I'm going to hand it over now to Chris Taylor, part of our PLM team under Kevin Hal Patterson. Chris?
Yes. Hi. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, I thought it would be good for me just to start on the section of kind of showing a bit of a summary of more or less from a Kandy PSTN perspective, a lot of the different items that were compliant from a regulatory perspective. I'm not going to repeat a lot of things that Sarah kind of went over. She covered Ray Baum's Act. She covered Kerry's Law. She did mention about the Trace Act, and that's effectively currently today our stir shaken solution by leveraging our underlying carrier partners capabilities, in this case in the US and Canada, that's IntelliPeer. She did talk about our Lawful Intercept again, complying with our underlying carrier, and there was a question that was posted about, do we have any other offerings around LI? And I'll get into that on the next couple of slides. The International Trades Group, I mean, this is the telecom group, I should say. Think of this as kind of the early version of what really the intention of the Trace Act for Stir Shaken is. So this is something that, like Sarah gave the example, and we're all having those examples where, we've got a spam call. An idea that technically speaking, we all have the right to contact your carrier and say, hey, listen, I'm getting these calls. Can you please, not get these calls to me? The problem is we all get probably, probably 5 or 6, if not more of these a week. And I don't think we want to be on the phone going back, because it is a legal obligation to your carrier to actually go and investigate as to, where these calls are coming from. Obviously, it's not been effective enough, and that's why the Trace Act has been adopted, and the FCC has been pushing out in terms of having all the carriers adopt the stir shaken regulations around that. The other one is, these to prevent robocalls. So the idea is that, Kandy does have a solution whereby, FCC has a couple of databases where they publish all of the carriers that are allowed to basically handle calls. And if that carrier is not in a particular database, then the objective here is that, we would not allow any of those numbers that are associated with that carrier that are not in our database to be made. So again, from a compliance perspective, we are compliant with that. And then there's other things around other kind of compliance items that have come up in the recent years, particularly around suicide prevention, suicide hotline. That's something that comes into force around the end of June. We will be compliant with that. There's some accessibility items as well. And then some of our customers, large carriers, also have the request for being able to report disconnects. So again, in the BYOC model, that wouldn't be applicable to us, but where we're offering PSTN certainly is something that we want to make sure that we can respect and be compliant with that. Let me look at the next slide, Sarah. Thank you. So so again, not to repeat anything what Sarah spoke about in terms of Lawful Intercept, I just wanted to bring out as part of our roadmap for this year, we are looking at implementing our own version of Lawful Intercept. Today, it's handled by our carrier partners, but our intention here is to have our own Lawful Intercept implementation. And initially, this will be for US and Canada. And the question is, well, why do we want to have that? I mean, the biggest reason here is that we certainly want to be able to have an extend sort of our PSTN offering, particularly offering, making sure that we have the best cost, best routes for our customers. And therefore, as we go forward, and now we want to be able to terminate calls not using the originating carrier. So as an example that Sarah's been giving with IntelliPeer, if our customers have a DID that we're reselling based on IntelliPeer, but then we want to choose the best quality service, best least cost route, we may want to send it down to another carrier partner. In order for us to do that, it means in that we're responsible for the lawful intercept. So that's one of the major reasons why we're going to be implementing that on our own. And then as we expand globally, then that's something that we also want to have the intention to support lawful intercept in all regions of the world as well. Okay, next slide. So just to give a little bit more around stir shake, and I think kind of Sarah's made it clear that right now today we're relying on our underlying carriers to provide and make sure that we're adhered to the stir shake and regulatory compliance there. But when we look at it from our perspective, there's a number of reasons why we want to also move forward with our own version of stir shaking. And I think from looking at it from a smart office client perspective, I think this kind of will resonate with our customers in the context that, for example, if you have a smart office client, and I know today this is how in the US, most mobile carriers now have this attestation whereby when you're receiving a call and that call has been verified, then sometimes it's like a checkbox or sometimes it says call it verified, that that call has a VERSAT score, it has been attested, and it's kind of been said, hey, we know who this caller is, and that attestation is passed on, and from an end user perspective, you feel confident of picking up that call, and it's going to be that user, versus kind of on the other side where it's an unverified call, it could potentially be a fraud call. Then as a user, you're alerted to that, and again, it falls probably under an attestation C, where we're not sure who the caller, whether they're authorized to use that number or whatever, or the carrier is not even known. It's at least flagged to the end user that's saying, hey, this may be potential fraud call. It may not be, but it's an unverified call, and it's up to you whether you want to answer that call or not. Okay, next slide, please. So all I'm trying to show in this diagram is previously how did that scenario come up, and effectively when there's a call coming in, we as in Kandy receive those calls, right? And then what we're doing in real time, we're kind of going up to our stir shaking implementation in the cloud and saying, oh, hey, is this, what's the what's the verification of this call? What's the attestation score? What's the VARSTAT? I mean, what is it? And then we'll treat the call and we'll pass the call then on from whether it's residential, whether it's an enterprise, as to whether that call is verified or whether it's unverified, as in per the previous example. And again, this is something that is on a roadmap, and we're planning to effectively introduce this by the end of this year to get those shown up on our smart office clients, etc.
So
Next
Chris,
slide.
we did have a question about and I'm going to go back here on the lawful intercept. So will this be just for people who utilize the Kandy PSTN, or would that support other carriers that maybe our partners use?
No. So again, for PSTN that we're responsible for terminating the call, then we're responsible for making sure we adhere to the appropriate court orders and enforce the lawful intercept. If it's another carrier that is terminating that call, then it's that carrier's responsibility to adhere to any court orders, and therefore they need to have some form of lawful intercept to make that happen.
Okay, so just to clarify, this would only be for those who use our PSTN.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so you know, I mean, again, it's Sarah's kind of indicated that this, you know, Kandy, as we know, we are, you know, an OCN. We are able to license originating, terminating services. Therefore, you know, again, from an FCC perspective, from a CRTC perspective, we need to be compliant with the stir shaken regulations. And so, what does that really mean when we look at it from, you know, a Kandy user making a call? So if an outbound call happens, then, you know, these calls need to first be, you know, authenticated, and there's technology behind that, certificates, et cetera, to do that authentication. And then there needs to be an attestation associated with that particular call. And like I said, today, we're currently outsourcing that to our carrier partners. In this case, it's IntelliPair. So they're doing that on our behalf, and which is fine. It meets all the necessary regulatory requirements to make that happen. As a pass through, this is in the case of, you know, BYOC customers, and they're using Kandy as an intermediate carrier. So in this case, we just simply need to pass on those carrier attestations, and, you know, through the BYOC model, that's effectively done. And then when we look at it from a user wanting to receive a call, then again, kind of in that opening slide where I show, you know, these calls being verified, whether they're verified, so whether, you know, it's has an A attestation, or whether it's a C, whereby, you know, that could be a potentially spam call. Again, these are being done by our underlying carrier, in this case, IntelliPair, for both Canada and US. Next slide. And that's it. Q&A.
So please input your questions here. Okay, there is one that came in, the attestation here. And again, going back to I think here we listed, let me go back one, these attestations A, B, and C are the ones that we utilize. It's only for numbers that Kandy resells. No, these attestations are across all of that's part of the stir shaken rules, right? Is that there's a category or a type A, B, and C. Is that right, Chris?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And so, as you said, if it's in this provider or your own soft switch and you're using that, then we will take and pass that on. That's part of the SIP
Correct.
header in there. So we're
Correct.
not going to block any of that.
No.
If you're using a third party, stir shaken, robo, whatever, up to you. We'll just pass that along. So we're not going to stop any of that. But if you're using our PSTN, then we will, in this example on the right-hand side, then we are exempt in that. And so I believe our category in that, as I understand, is B. So we're not, they know that the customer is known, but they may not necessarily know that that telephone number is there. So it will be passed.
Correct, sir.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, go ahead, Michael. What do you have? And just put them in the chat, and that way we minimize the background noise and stuff on these. Do we accept the inbound verification results feature from bandwidth.com? So bandwidth.com would be a cloud provider like this. So Chris, can you answer that? So if they're using, say, bandwidth.com and the inbound verification results feature from Bandwidth, that should work on our network too, right?
Yes, I'm not familiar with the that feature. Sorry, I don't have my camera on. I'm not familiar with that feature from Bandwidth. I'd have to probably look into it, follow up. But If it's simply something that we would again pass through on, then we would do that. But again, I don't know what their inbound verification feature is. So
There's also a transit identity header service as well with bandwidth. So, but we can work with you directly, Michael, on that. He's got
yeah,
an article in
follow
there
up
too.
and yeah, we can take these questions and follow up. And thanks for the link there, Michael. I see it.
Okay. I will say if there are additional questions that anybody has, we're happy to answer those. You can also email us at customersuccess@kandy.io, and that is a group of my team, and we're happy to respond back and get you any of the answers that you might need there. So do stay on the lookout. We do hold our PLM update webinar that Kevin Hal Patterson, who's also on now, hosts every quarter. And if you go to our website, kandy.io/events, let me open that up and share that with you. Drag that over. And so this is today. We do have the next webinar will be on some of our training certification programs. We'll have one on billing and reporting. And then in April, Kevin Hal Patterson and team will talk about the new functionality that we've added in. And it's some peeks into additional things that we're doing as well. Of course, you can always, we also have a support update and a poly update coming. There's additional topics here. If you have input on those topics, maybe there's some that are not listed that you would really like us to cover, then we're happy to do that. Again, customer success at kandy.io. And any past webinars like back in December that Kevin Hal Patterson and team provided, you can go back and look at those too. I think that was a question, do we provide these recordings afterwards? So you'll see these go back quite a while, and these are great resources for your teams internally and even new employees to go in and look at. So don't forget kandy.io/events, and you can also register for any upcoming leader-led training here as well. So I'll add that in the chat. All right, if there are not any other questions, thank you everybody for your time. We appreciate your business, and we appreciate the relationship that we have with you. And we want to make these sessions as appropriate as possible to meet your needs. So again, thank you. I'll send out the recording links to this, but you can always go to upcoming webinars and register for new ones and access to our past webinars here as well. Have a great afternoon, evening, or morning.